Hello and welcome to choosing and setting up a home recording studio. Throughout this video presentation, I'm going to walk you through every piece of equipment that you'll need to set up your own home recording studio. However, the emphasis throughout this video is going to be on professional studio grade equipment that will achieve the same high quality results of any chart-topping hit that you'd hear on the radio. But although the equipment I'm going to be talking about in this video presentation won't necessarily be the cheapest, it's far from being the most expensive, but when used correctly, it will rival the quality of anything in the album charts at the moment. But what you've got to remember is that back in the 70s and 80s, the cost of a 48-track tape recorder, a huge mixing desk and all that outboard equipment to go with it would have cost tens of thousands of pounds, and that was when tens of thousands of pounds was considered a lot of money. Today, you can achieve studio grade recordings for between 5,000 and 8,000. Now don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with starting out with budget equipment, a £200 audio interface, a pair of monitors for £150 and a £75 microphone for example. But if you're serious about recording and producing a single, or an album perhaps, that you intend to send to record companies, or even if you're going to write and produce songs to distribute yourself via iTunes, you're going to need equipment that can produce studio grade recordings. And the various pieces of equipment that I'm going to be demonstrating and talking about throughout this video will do just that. For me, the key to any good home recording studio starts with the actual workstation desk. You're going to be sitting at the desk for long periods of time, so it's important to have a workstation designed for the job, so that you're in a comfortable working environment with an audio workstation that's ergonomically friendly and that all your hardware is in the right position, especially the computer screen and audio monitors. Having a comfortable working environment makes a huge difference. A comfortable music producer is a happy music producer. Spaces in your workstation for rack equipment are important, as you'll probably end up with some standard 19-inch rack gear at some point as you build up your studio. The workstation I use has that very feature, but there are other advantages to having a rack shelf as part of the workstation, which I'll come to in a moment. The one I'm using here is made by AKA Design. They're based in London, and in my opinion, their audio workstations are about as good as you can get. This model's called the Pro Media, and it's the smallest workstation they do. This configuration with the rack spaces and the top monitor shelf comes in at around £1,200. This particular model has a rack height of 2U, but you can also get it with a height of 3U. 2U has a height of 93mm, while 3U has a height of 137mm. Both have the standard rack width of 19 inches to accommodate standard studio rack equipment. I went for the 2U option, which will allow between 1 and 2 pieces of rack equipment per side. As you can see, I have a vocal effects processor fitted in the left side, and as it's quite high, it pretty much takes up the entire height. On the right side, I have an Apollo 8 audio interface, which isn't quite so high, so there's still space underneath it for another piece of kit should I decide to add something else later on. One advantage of having a rack space is that the screen and monitor shelf is raised up, and with the 2U rack height, it will bring an average 25 to 30 inch screen up to the correct viewing height, where your eyes are about a third from the top to halfway down the screen, which means you won't get neck ache by looking up or down to a screen that isn't at the correct height on your desk. Another great advantage to a proper workstation is the all-important placement of your listening monitors. As you can see here, with my audio monitors placed on sound isolation pads on top of the rack shelf, the position of their tweeters is on an exact level with my ears, exactly where they should be for mixing purposes, but I'll talk more about monitor placement a little later on. As I've already mentioned, a good ergonomically designed workstation will save your back and neck as you sit at it for hours on end, and also it will last much longer too. This AKA Design Pro Media workstation is incredibly durable and it looks the part. You should check out AKA Design's website at www.akadesign.co.uk. You can buy directly from them or from one of their recommended dealers, a list of which can be found on their website. When it comes to room acoustics and sound treatment, many newbies to the home recording scene either don't know about it, don't understand the importance of it, or they simply hang a few blankets around the room thinking that they'll do the job. Well, the truth is they won't. In fact, they can make the sound worse, as all the blankets do is dry out the room totally, which can be worse than having nothing at all. And forget about egg boxes, we won't even go there. When it comes to professional room treatment, you don't actually want 100% coverage of the walls, as that would be just too dry. 35 to 50% coverage to maintain a little bit of natural room tone is what's required. I can't stress the importance of getting your room treated so it sounds good. Without good acoustic treatment, you won't be able to judge your mix very well because of all the unwanted sound reflections and reverberation bouncing off the walls. This is especially important when recording vocals. If your room isn't treated, you'll almost certainly record too much room reverb. It might be a little or it might be a lot, depending on your room size and the furnishings. But once you've recorded that unwanted room reverb along with your vocals, it will be impossible to remove it in your editor. Remember, it's easier to add reverb in your audio editing software than it is to remove it. The idea is to get a good clean vocal recording with little to no reverberation from an acoustically treated room. The room treatment products I use are made by Universal Acoustics. They're a UK company based in Milton Keynes, and the quality of their products are second to none. The kit I'm using here is their Mercury 2 Acoustic Treatment Room Kit, and it costs around £395 and comes with 40 wedges and 4 bass traps and 2 tins of adhesive spray, as well as an installation guide. The Mercury 2 is ideal for smaller rooms, such as this one, but Universal Acoustics also sell larger kits for larger rooms, such as the Mercury 4, 5 and 6, and they also sell individual wedges and bass traps in various colours. Unlike some other acoustic treatment manufacturers, Universal Acoustics have given a little more thought to their designs. For example, their wedges are cut flat across the top so they don't perish and frizzle away over time, and children can't pick pointy bits off them. The way they're cut means that they'll last much longer, and also the colours don't fade over time, and they're actually fire retardant too. Here I've actually used a tin of Space Mist supplied by Universal Acoustics as part of the room kit to fix the ceiling wedges and bass traps, but I also found double-sided car number plate tape was enough to hold up the wall wedges, so if you're renting your studio and you don't want them up permanently, you could try the same. However, Universal Acoustics are going to be launching what they call temp tabs in 2017, which they've been developing for a couple of years now, and they should be better than the double-sided car accessory tape that I used. Knowing where to position individual wedges isn't as complicated as you might think. The Universal Acoustics website has diagrams and tips about wedge placement, and you can download the free Acoustic Room Treatment Guide from their website. In fact, I'd highly recommend you read it before fixing any wedges or bass traps to your walls and ceiling. Having your room acoustically treated is, in my opinion, the first thing you should do before buying any other pieces of studio equipment. Unfortunately, too many people spend loads of money on equipment and forget about the room. But for me, the room is a piece of equipment, and it's a vital one at that. For more information about Universal Acoustics room treatment kits, you can visit their website at www.universal-acoustics.com. You can buy directly from them or from their dealers, a list of which can be found on their website. The computer is the heart of any home recording studio because that's where your audio editing software, known as the DAW or Digital Audio Workstation, will reside, and you'll use this DAW to record and compile the various tracks in your songs, as well as adding effects and doing all the mixing and mastering. Whether you choose a Mac or a PC, it's important to buy a fast, well-spec'd machine with plenty of RAM, USB, Firewire or Thunderbolt inputs, and a large hard drive. The computer I'm using here is an Apple iMac with a 3.2 GHz Intel Core i5 processor and a 1TB internal hard drive and 8 GB of RAM. This kind of spec is fine for most home recording applications. I've been using Apple Macs for about 15 years now, and having used both Mac and Windows-based computers in the past, I've always found Macs to be more reliable and more stable, and generally easy to use. In fact, I can't even remember the last time I had any moment of downtime with any of the Macs I've owned. If you want to use Logic Pro 10, like I am here, you'll have to buy a Mac because Logic isn't available on the Windows platform. The DAW, or Digital Audio Workstation, is basically the audio editing software that you'll install onto your computer. My home recording studio is based around Logic Pro 10 installed on an iMac. But whether you use a Mac or a PC, or whether you choose Logic Pro 10, Pro Tools, Ableton Live, Steinberg Cubase, or any other DAW, the principles are basically the same. If you don't have a computer, or you're thinking of buying one specifically to use as part of your home recording studio, I'd strongly recommend taking a look at the Apple iMac range. Once you've got your computer all set up on your workstation and your DAW installed, you're going to need a good quality external hard drive. There are several really good reasons for using an external hard drive as opposed to the drive that's built into your computer. The first and most important one is for backup purposes. So purchasing an external drive with RAID 1 mirroring capabilities is crucial. A typical RAID 1 configuration would consist of an external hard drive enclosure, be it Thunderbolt, Firewire or USB, that houses two separate physical drives. Then any data that gets written to the first of the two drives is automatically duplicated onto the second. Once it's set up, which only takes a minute, you don't have to worry about it. All you'll see on your desktop is a single hard drive. But hard drives can give up the ghost or just break down for no apparent reason. And if this happens with one of the drives in the enclosure, you can simply take the faulty drive out and pop in a new one. And all the data that's on the working drive will automatically copy across to the new one, so you'll be back to two backups again. If you've been working hard for weeks or even months on a music project, the last thing you'll want to do is play Russian roulette with all your hard work. So a RAID 1 configured external hard drive is a must-have item for any home recording studio. Next, your DAW, especially if you use Logic Pro 10 on a Mac like I do, will have a lot of built-in music samples and loops. Logic Pro 10 has about 40 gigabytes of media in total, and if you're using the software instruments or loops that come with the DAW, and you have several tracks running all at the same time, you'll end up putting the computer's system hard drive under a lot of pressure to carry out the work of running the computer's operating system and the DAW, as well as playing back all the software samples and loops, which could lead to glitches, especially if you're working with lots of tracks. If you have an external hard drive, you can usually transfer all the DAW's media to it, relieving the computer's system drive of all that extra strain. You should choose a hard drive that's cool running and built to run all day without any issues and won't let you down, and preferably a high speed model. If you have a recent Mac, you could go for a Thunderbolt hard drive, as the transfer speeds are phenomenal. Also, a large capacity drive will come in handy, as audio files can take up quite a lot of room. The hard drives that I use are made by CalDigit, who are by far one of the better external hard drive makers around. I actually have two different CalDigit models, a VR Firewire drive and a T4 Thunderbolt drive. The VR has two internal hard drives while the T4 has four. But the most important thing is that both can be set up quickly to a RAID 1 mirror configuration. The T4 model cost around £1,000. If, however, you don't need four drives, I'd look at the VR model, which still has RAID 1 mirroring capabilities and, like the T4, comes in various hard drive capacities. However, the VR is only available as a Firewire 800 or USB 3 version at present. There's no Thunderbolt model. But I've been using my VR with a short Apple Firewire to Thunderbolt patch cable, so I can utilise the spare Thunderbolt port on my Mac, and it works a treat. Over the years, I've tried many makes and models of external hard drives, and I know quite a few video producers and musicians who've tried even more than I have. And the people who I know who use CalDigit drives are the ones who have little to no issues with reliability and drive failure. The CalDigit VR and T4 models are built like metal bricks with a heavy and robust construction, and they run flawlessly all day long. The only slight negative, and this is with the T4 model, is that there is some audible fan noise. Now don't get me wrong, it's pretty quiet, But if you want to play it safe, you could always buy an extra long Thunderbolt cable and place the drive in another room, or behind a soft chair perhaps, to help mute the sound. Like I said, it's pretty quiet and there's every chance that your microphone, depending on the distance from the mic to the hard drive, won't pick up the sound anyway. You could always do a simple test by recording 30 seconds of room tone and halfway through the recording turn the hard drive off and then play back the recording to see if you can hear any difference. The T4 has 4 internal hard drives running all at once, so a fan is necessary as part of the enclosure design. There's just no way around this, but the fan is pretty quiet, all things considered, and it's certainly quieter than anything else out there. If you want a drive that has barely audible fan noise or no fan noise at all, then you should take a look at the CalDigit VR model. It still has 2 physical 3.5-inch fast drives, so setting up a RAID 1 configuration is easy. And although it does have an internal fan, it's an energy-saving, temperature-controlled smart fan that runs only when the VR needs it the most, which isn't all that often, as the VR2 has an aluminium enclosure to assist with heat dissipation. And even when the fan does kick in, it's barely audible, which makes the VR ideal for recording studio environments. You can find out more about CalDigit hard drives on their website at www.caldigit.com/UK. The audio interface is the all-important piece of equipment that allows you to get your sounds into your computer's DAW in the first place, be it vocals via a microphone, guitars, synthesizers, or anything else. It takes the analog sounds of your instrument and converts them to digital before sending them into your computer's DAW. Audio interfaces have various instrument and microphone inputs, as well as various outputs, including monitor outputs where you can connect your audio monitors, and of course either a USB, Firewire or Thunderbolt that will allow you to connect it to your computer. The audio interface is one of the most important pieces of equipment that you can buy for your home or project recording studio outside of acoustic treatment and quality monitoring. In fact, it could be argued that a large chunk of your budget should go towards a good quality audio interface. There are several reasons for this. The most important being microphone preamps and the quality of the AD to DA conversion. Some of the cheaper audio interfaces use budget mic preamps that just aren't high quality or high performance and can be noisy with low gain and will result in poor quality sonic results from whatever instrument you record via your microphones. For example, it would be pointless buying an expensive microphone and plugging it into a mediocre AI, as the audio interface will simply strangle the quality out of the microphone. The singer may have a brilliant voice and your expensive microphone could do a great job on picking up that voice, but when it gets to the budget, low quality audio interface, it's going to be the equivalent of putting your singer's voice and that great microphone through a mincer just before the signal gets into your computer. Budget AD converters can also sound grainy with high levels of noise and distortion, all of which can degrade the sound and cheapen the delivery of the recorded sound. Remember, the entire chain in your recording studio is only as strong as the weakest link. You really do need to be mindful when choosing your audio interface. You'll need one that has high quality mic preamps with low noise and high performance conversion from an analog to digital domain. A professional standard audio interface will often have high quality internal components and electronics, increasing reliability and stability, and they're often combined with more powerful software routing and control. There are many other benefits to buying a high quality audio interface apart from the ones that I've mentioned here, such as driver stability, latency performance and built-in low latency monitoring, which is important especially when recording timed-based performances such as drums or vocals. It's for these reasons that I use the Universal Audio Apollo 8 audio interface. Universal Audio have a reputation for making high-end, studio-grade audio equipment dating all the way back to the 1950s up to the present day. And now, with the latest Thunderbolt Apollo interfaces, they really are about as good as you can get. Universal Audio have several models in their audio interface lineup featuring Thunderbolt, USB and Firewire connectivity for different computer systems, ranging from £600 to around £3,000. The Apollo 8 that I'm using cost around £1,800 and it's a Thunderbolt version, which is ideal for my modern Mac. But UA Thunderbolt Apollos now function on Windows 10 machines too. The Apollo 8 actually does quite a bit more than act as an audio interface by providing real-time audio processing and world-class DSP plugins for adding the authentic sound of classic analog hardware to your recordings. But even if you don't use these other features, as an audio interface it really is right up there with stunning quality mic preamps and electronics that won't dilute the quality of anything that you put into it. For example, I use a Neumann U87 microphone, and when using the Apollo 8 I'm safe in the knowledge that every ounce of quality coming from the Neumann mic and the singer is going to make it through the Apollo and into my computer's DAW unhindered and without a single trace of quality loss. The same goes for any other instrument that you put through it. If you're a bassist, you might have a classic alembic bass, for example, with brilliant pickups and electronics. If you had a budget audio interface, the quality of your expensive guitar would be degraded somewhat by the time the bass lines reach the computer. You could buy a more budget-priced audio interface to start off with, but your songs and your creativity deserve to be heard in their best form. You don't have to spend £2 or £3 on a super high-end universal audio interface, because even the £650 Apollo Twin Solo model has a professional studio-grade high 24-bit 192 kHz AD conversion rate, and it features 2 high-quality unison mic preamps too, enough for most songwriters, and it's expandable over ADAT for more inputs in the future. One of the best features of the Apollo 8 is the unison preamps. Unison preamps allow you to tailor the tone of your recording and find your own personal sound. It offers a modern, transparent preamplifier that can be changed into many vintage flavours, such as an early tube UA610B preamp, for example. No other audio interface offers this analog and digital emulation of classic equipment, which can be tailored for each recording, making the Apollo a true sonic chameleon. These unison preamp and onboard signal processing features also exist on the DI side, as well as on the mic inputs. So if you're recording in a band, you can have different preamp and guitar effects enabled for the vocals, guitars and bass, and record them all in one go. Most other AIs out there are essentially one flavour of vanilla. They act as a simple in-out device and nothing more. Another key difference is that with the Apollo 8 you can record through the DSP processing effects like a professional engineer would back in the day. So instead of fixing it in the mix, you can get it right at the beginning. Unlike other AIs that can sound thin with no depth or body to the sound, the Apollo can load up tools into the platform to sound warmer and less digital, with those great analog qualities that these added harmonics can bring. The Apollo comes with DSP processing built in, so once you've finished recording, it also acts as a turbocharger for your computer, giving you extra processing power. Basically, if you load the Apollo plugins into Logic, Cubase or Pro Tools, for example, your computer won't be taxed by extra processing power, as the Apollo takes care of it. And the Apollo is also compatible with both Mac and Windows, and it features a library of over 100 world-class DSP effects based upon rare and vintage audio equipment from decades past. The Apollo 8 actually comes with about £1,000 worth of studio-grade plugins, making its £1,800 price tag more attractive, especially when you think about the quality of Universal Audio's plugins, which are in a different league to those that come with Logic Pro 10 and most other DAWs. UA's plugins cost between £90 and £300 each, but simply put, they're by far the best plugins money can buy, and if you consider that 4 or 5 UA plugins costing around £600 would represent tens of thousands of pounds worth of outboard hardware equipment, they really are incredible value for money. To find out more about Universal Audio's interfaces and their amazing plugins, visit www.uaudio.com. Loudspeakers, or monitors as they're known in the world of recording studios, are what you'll use for mixing your songs and listening back to your material. They're one of the most important pieces of equipment that will make up your studio. In fact, some people say that they are the most important piece of equipment, for many reasons, but the main one being that the monitors are the only pieces of equipment in your studio that you actually hear. It's important to remember that there's a huge difference between regular domestic hi-fi speakers and dedicated near-field studio monitors. In a nutshell, a pair of studio mixing monitors aren't supposed to have any unique characteristics, and they aren't supposed to bring anything to the party. They're designed in such a way that they'll reproduce a totally neutral sound, so that what you hear is exactly what you'll get. Domestic hi-fi speakers don't work like that. They all have their own unique characteristics and flavours, which is just one of the many reasons why domestic hi-fi speakers are no good for recording studio mixing purposes. It's important to choose your monitors carefully, and ones that will be suitable for the size of the room you're working in. Most studio monitors are near field, which are designed to sound good when you sit close to them. Also, most studio monitors are active, which means that they have their own built-in amplifiers, but above all, they're designed to reproduce a neutral and uncoloured sound. High-quality near-field monitors should be able to reproduce every little sonic detail with a translucent sound image, good tonal depth and stereo imaging. Studio monitors are designed to be neutral in sound, so when you're mixing, you know that what you're hearing is exactly what you're getting. It's for these reasons that I personally use Adam Audio monitors. Adam Audio are a German company based in Berlin, and they've carved themselves a reputation for building high-quality near-field active monitors with incredible sonic performance. Smaller rooms and studios need smaller monitors, and for the small studio I'm working in here, the Adam A7Xs are the ideal size. With the AX series, you really do get a lot of monitor for your money, and they're a great position tool. Fatigue was always another issue with near-field monitors, not being able to listen to them for long periods of time without suffering from the effects of fatigue. This was usually down to monitor distortion. With the Adam monitors, they use an air motion transformer tweeter, and it doesn't suffer from distortion, so there are no issues with fatigue, and you won't go tone deaf either. The tweeter itself is also very efficient, as there are no moving parts, unlike a voice call tweeter, which moves in and out. Also, the Adam tweeters are made in a different part of the factory to ensure position quality and superb sound reproduction. The Adam A7Xs cost around £900 a pair, but when you hear them, you'll know where that money went. They have just the right balance of natural bass, not too light, but not too heavy either. The mids are crisp, clear and articulate, which is vital for mixing, while the treble is distinctive without being overly bright. So all in all, they won't give you fatigue during long mixing sessions. Apart from the superior sound that these monitors produce, I especially like the front firing ports. This means that you don't have to be quite so critical with the monitor's placement regarding rear walls. In fact, you could put them right up to the wall if you wanted. Also, the on-off switches are on the front too. This might sound like a small thing, but I've always found it somewhat annoying having to reach around the back to touch up the various XLR and jack sockets until my fingers eventually come to rest on that elusive on-off switch. This is a much better way of doing it, and I don't know why more monitor companies don't follow suit. The A7Xs are the perfect size for the room I'm working in here, but depending on the size of your home studio, you might want to go for a slightly bigger or a slightly smaller pair. If you decide to go with Adam monitors like these, they make 4 different sizes in the AX series: the A3X, the A5X, the A7X and the A8X. So they'll have something to suit most people's requirements and room sizes. The A7Xs that I use have a 7-inch bass driver and Adam's unique X-Out tweeter, which produces sublimely detailed highs and upper mids, which is a must when it comes to mixing. The tweeters are driven by a 50-watt built-in amplifier, while the bass driver is driven by a 100-watt built-in amp. The AX series also have high shelf, low shelf and tweeter level adjusters on the back. The chances are that they'll sound perfectly okay in their default positions. These adjusters are for room compensation. For example, if your studio isn't acoustically treated, you could lose a little bass from the bottom end. The room compensation adjuster dials on the back of the A7Xs means that you could adjust the low shelf to bring the low bass ends back up again, making it easier to judge your mix. The room I'm using here is acoustically treated, so I don't have to make much compensations, but they're there if you need them. For more information about Adam monitors, visit www.adam-audio.com. Now, once you've bought your monitors, it's important that their placement is spot on. There's no point in spending $1,000 on a pair of monitors, then not giving any thought to their placement in your studio, be it on stands just behind the workstation or on the workstation desk itself. The key things to remember are that the distance between the tweeters of each monitor and your ear should form a perfect equilateral triangle, otherwise known as the stereo triangle. For example, if the tweeters of both speakers are 5 foot apart, then the distance from each tweeter should be 5 foot from your ears. Also, it's important that the monitors are toed in to point directly at your face. When you turn your head slightly to face either monitor straight on, you shouldn't be able to see the sides of the monitors, just the front. It's also important to position the monitors so that their tweeters are level with your ears when you're sitting at your workstation. If they are too high or too low, you might not be able to hear all the frequencies and it will affect the final result of your mix. This rule applies to all monitors regardless of the make and model. If you have your monitors sitting directly on your workstation, as I do here, it's important to use some isolation pads so that the sound doesn't transfer through the workstation, which would otherwise muddy the sound. I have a pair of Universal Acoustics vibro pads, which are specially designed and a very dense acoustic foam that means no quality will be lost through sound transmitting through your workstation. These vibro pads cost around £30 a pair and they're made by Universal Acoustics, the same company who make the studio acoustic treatment that I have installed on the walls in my studio here. There may be times when you want or even need to monitor the sound through headphones instead of your monitors. If you're working on a project late at night and you don't want to annoy your neighbours, for example, or just to hear your mix through closed back headphones for a different sound perspective. Choosing the right headphones for monitoring and mixing is just as important as choosing speaker monitors, in that they have to produce a neutral sound so that what you hear is exactly what you get. I'd always go for closed back headphones for mixing and monitoring purposes. Closed back basically means that the headphones block out external sounds, which is what's often required in a studio environment. For example, a vocalist would use closed back headphones while laying down the vocal track. The headphones will allow the vocalist to hear back the track along with their vocals in the headphones while singing. And because they're closed back, little to no sound will escape from the headphones and get picked up by the microphone. It also means that the vocalist will only hear their voice coming in through the headphones and not their voice seeping in through the room. There are plenty of makes and models of high quality studio grade closed back headphones, and over the years I've tried quite a few, but I've recently settled on the Beyerdynamic brand and more specifically the DT1770 Pros. They cost around £400, but what you get for that is a jaw-dropping soundstage and a beautifully crafted soundscape, not to mention the vast frequency range, which you just don't get with cheaper headphones. The core idea behind the DT1770 Pros is the Tesla technology, which is a means of increasing the magnetic flux across the drivers, and the transducers are more sensitive with a greater dynamic range as they're more responsive to the incoming signal. They cost a bit more because they require a high level of engineering expertise and a more stringent manufacturing process. For the record, forget the Beats by Dre headphones. I know they make headphones that cost around £300, and while they might look pretty and colourful hanging on the fancy stands at your local Apple store or on the heads of famous pop stars in their videos, they just don't cut it with real audiophiles or in a recording studio environment. And they're certainly no match when compared to the likes of Beyerdynamic. Beats headphones and most other domestic headphones are sonically enhanced, meaning they aren't flat, which basically means they're next door to useless for any kind of studio mixing purposes. And don't be fooled by the use of the word studio that some of these domestic headphone brands often stick in the title. Just because it has the word studio on the box doesn't necessarily mean that they're any good for studio use, or that they're actually any good at all. It's just a buzzword that some mainstream headphone brands use for marketing purposes. In fact, the only budget headphones I've ever used that came close to the Beyerdynamic DT1770 Pros are actually Beyerdynamic DT770 Pros, which cost around £125. The DT770 Pros are about as close to the 1770 Pros as you can get. Perhaps the detail in the treble isn't quite as crisp and clear, and the bass is perhaps a trifle heavy compared to the 1770 Pros, but they really are pretty close. And they'll certainly sound way better than most other brands costing 2 or 3 times the price. But if you can stretch an extra £250, I'd look no further than the DT1770s. Otherwise, at £125, it's the Bayer DT770 Pros all day long. The Bayer Dynamic DT1770 Pros that I use are studio-grade monitoring headphones that reveal every ounce that the music has to offer, and as cleanly and accurately as possible. The frequency response of these headphones is massive, with an incredibly low 5 Hz up to a whopping 40,000 Hz with an impedance of 250. This really is an incredible frequency range if you consider that most humans can only physically hear frequencies down to about 20 Hz and not above 20,000 Hz anyway. In fact, your dog would have to wear these headphones to fully appreciate the upper frequency range. That's how good they are. As for the build quality, well, they certainly feel like they're built to withstand the rigours of daily professional studio use. Even the cable is of the detachable mini XLR socket type, so it can be replaced if necessary. Not that I see the cable perishing anytime soon, because the 2 cables that come with the 1770s, one coiled and one straight, are the toughest headphone cables I've ever seen. The sounds that come out of the 1770s can be described as phenomenal. With that huge frequency response and the natural crisp and clear sound, absolutely every nuance of the music comes through. The amazing thing about the DT170 Pros is that every musical range stands out on its own without getting muddled into the next range up. For example, the bass is deep and powerful, and yet there's a clear distinction with the mids, while the crystal clear treble sits nicely on top. It's just so easy to hear the mix in these headphones regardless of musical style. A MIDI keyboard controller is what you'll use to play in various software instruments that reside inside your DAW. For example, in Logic Pro 10, you could set up a new track for bass guitar, then choose one of the bass guitar samples, such as a classic 70s bass for example. Then, when you play the keys on your MIDI keyboard, what you'll hear is that classic 70s bass sound. A MIDI keyboard basically means that you have hundreds of software instruments at your fingertips, without having to physically own a house full of guitars. Of course, a MIDI keyboard controller also does so much more than this. Choosing a MIDI keyboard controller can be a real headache with all the different makes and models out there, not to mention the inferior quality ones. So when it comes to choosing a MIDI keyboard controller, the first thing you should ask yourself is what you want to get out of it and what functions and features you'll actually need and use. You don't have to spend £800 on a full-size 88-note all-singing, all-dancing model with an arsenal of faders, knobs, switches and pads if all you're going to do is play in software instruments in your home recording studio. Also, the more keys, faders and control knobs it has, the more space it's going to take up on your desk. So why have all those extra keys and functions taking up your desk space if you're never going to use them? 49-key MIDI keyboards seem to be the sweet spot for being able to play with both hands together, and 49 keys are more than enough for playing in software instruments via your DAW. Some people like to have a few more, 61 for example. Personally, I like the balance that the 49-key model provides in plane scope and the room it takes up on my desk. Let's face it, most of us won't want to play a Beethoven piano sonata into our computers via a MIDI keyboard anyway. You'd probably want a Bosendorfer grand piano for that, and a concert hall to go with it. Although you can get less than 49 key models, 32 or 25 for example, they're somewhat limiting in what you can do with them, so I'd recommend looking at a 49 key or a 61 key model. Next, I'd be looking at the type of keyboard action you'd prefer. Some have a very light spring action, this is known as a synth action, while others have a semi-weighted action and some are even fully weighted. The latter attempt to replicate the feel of an acoustic piano. I'm actually a classically trained pianist, and when I'm sitting at my acoustic piano playing Chopin, a nice weighted action is what's required. But for the MIDI keyboard, that isn't always necessary. In fact, it can even be a bad thing. If you were to try and play in a super fast slap bass line, via the software instrument with a demi-semiquaver pattern, a fully weighted MIDI keyboard could cause you to run into difficulties, and it could even slow you down, unless you're a concert pianist called Lang Lang, of course. I find a SynthAction or a semi-weighted keyboard with full-size keys and touch sensitivity to be the perfect balance for speed, articulation and control when playing in various software instruments. I'd also go for a MIDI keyboard that transmits the MIDI data via USB and not via a traditional 5-pin DIN MIDI connector, as this would mean buying an extra piece of hardware to allow you to connect it to your computer. But most MIDI keyboard controllers send MIDI data via USB these days, so this shouldn't be a problem. Some of the better mates of MIDI keyboard are those from Akai, Novation, Arturia, Native Instruments and Roland, which are generally well built with high quality keybeds. There are other MIDI keyboard makers out there, such as Nectar and M-Audio, but I'm not a huge fan of these mates, as I find the quality of their keyboards to be somewhat questionable. And also from experience, I find that they're just a bit cheap and plasticky in the way they feel, and the keyboards don't inspire much confidence. There's no doubt that the general build quality and feel of any given keyboard can vary considerably from one maker to the next, so I'd always recommend doing a bit of research, then narrow it down to 2 or 3, and then go to your music shop and check them out and try them. The MIDI keyboard controller that I use is an Akai Advanced 49, which is a really well built 49 key SynthAction model with a high quality touch sensitive keyboard action and 8 touch sensitive pads, along with a whole host of controls, functions and playback buttons, and the usual pitch and bend modulation wheels, which are a joy to use. Akai's professional division make superb MIDI keyboard controllers, so if you need the extra features and functions, I'd firmly recommend them. Whatever MIDI keyboard controller you decide to buy, most of the better mates and models will integrate with most of the popular DAW software packages, such as Logic Pro 10, Pro Tools, Ableton and Cubase, for example. You can expect to pay between £100 and £150 for a no frills MIDI keyboard, but don't expect great quality at this end of the market, and for between £350 and £600 for a high quality and high spec model, such as the Akai Advanced 49 that I'm using here, which cost a little under £400. For more details on the Akai professional range of MIDI keyboard controllers, visit www.akaipro.com. If you intend writing, mixing and producing songs that have vocals, you'll need a microphone as part of your home recording studio. When it comes to microphones, I can't stress the importance of this vital piece of equipment strongly enough. I know monitors are critical, so is a high quality audio interface, but a studio grade microphone should be a high priority for your home recording studio. The thing is, unlike MIDI keyboard controllers, computers and other high-tech equipment, monitors and microphone technology doesn't actually change very often. There are loads of professional recording studios all over the world that have been using the same mics and studio monitors for 30 or 40 years, and even longer. So when it comes to buying a microphone, it really could be a once-in-a-lifetime buy. So why buy a budget mic when you're going to have to live with it for many years to come? Especially when the quality between a cheap mic and an expensive one is often huge. There are many makes and models of microphones on the market these days. The budget ones are often cheap and nasty affairs which should be avoided. Then there are the mid-range models. All have their own unique characteristics, some good and some not so good. You should treat purchasing a microphone like a relationship, because you're probably going to be married to it for many years to come, so you really do need to choose a high quality studio grade microphone from the off. For me, it's the Neumann U87 AI every time. Some of you might have heard of it, and if you have, then you're probably letting out a little whistle because you'll know that a Neumann U87 cost around £2,000 to buy new. But you'll also know why they cost that amount. Each and every U87 is handmade in Germany to the very highest standards and tolerances. Practically every professional recording studio in the world will have a Neumann U87 in its arsenal. Here in the UK, most of the top recording studios and radio station DJs use them. The BBC have loads of them in their studios, and for good reason. The U87 first came out back in 1967, and it's hardly changed in all that time. More recently, the U87i became the U87ai, where the circuitry increases the operational headroom by supplying the bias voltages for the capsules through reduced resistance, which results in a high sensitivity and an improved signal-to-noise ratio. The Neumann U87 is unique in that they're assembled by hand in a clean room, so no dust particles can get caught in the capsule. They also have a gold-plated large diaphragm, which makes it more sensitive, giving superb and accurate reproduction of the audio. It also has lots of polar patterns that makes it very flexible in studio environments. The sound characteristics of the U87 speak for themselves. Literally, the chances are, if you've ever listened to any of the DJs on the main BBC radio stations, you've probably heard a Neumann U87 microphone. In fact, I've heard of some singers saying that once they'd sung into U87, they don't want to sing into anything else again. Simply put, there's no substitute for this microphone, and I'd recommend doing whatever it takes to buy one. It's an investment you'll have to make only once, and the U87 will last you a lifetime, and they don't come much better than this. You'll also need a pop shield to use with your mic. This small, relatively inexpensive accessory acts as an anti-pop noise protection filter for your microphone. Every recording studio in the world uses one to eliminate the popping sounds that are caused by the mechanical impact of fast-moving air that hits the microphone while the vocalist is singing. But it also protects the mic from moisture, which can cause mold growth and potentially cause damage to it over time. Essentially, the pop shield is made up of one or more layers of acoustically semi-transparent material which is stretched over a circular frame, which in turn is attached to a flexible gooseneck with a clamp at the end that attaches to your mic stand so that the filter is positioned in front of your mic to prevent the popping sounds that occur during the pronunciation of aspirated plosives, such as words beginning with P and B. The pop shield will attenuate the energy of the plosive, which could otherwise exceed the input capacity of your mic, causing it to clip and distort the sound. Some pop shields are made of a metal mesh screen, like the one I'm using, which is a Stedman ProScreen XL. This metal screen is great because it won't perish over time, and you can even wash it once in a while. You can buy cheap nasty pop shields over the internet for around £10, but I wouldn't bother with them as the acoustic material they use just isn't up to scratch, and it could even degrade the sound. Two of the better pop screens are the Stedman ProScreen XL and the Polyton Superscreen. The Poly Superscreen is pretty pricey at around £150, while the Stedman ProScreen XL costs around £60. Also, Neumann makes one for around £60. When it comes to cables and stands, you don't want to skimp on the price, especially with the cables. After all, it's the cables that send the signal from your microphone and instruments into your audio interface, and from the audio interface to your monitors. It would be a shame to have a high-grade microphone and a superb audio interface with top-quality mic preamps connected together with a cheap microphone cable for £2.95 off eBay, because the quality from the mic to the audio interface would get lost, and the quality of the sound that you're hearing as the AI sends that signal to your monitors would also be hindered. Having said that, you don't have to go crazy by spending thousands of pounds on cables like some of the top recording studios do. There are some cable companies out there who make professional studio-grade cables at reasonable prices. Some of the best brands are those from Megami, Monster Cable and Klotz. The cables I use are made by Klotz, and most of their cables, be it monitor cables, XLR microphone cables or instrument cables, cost between £15 and £35 each. So the chances are you'll be able to buy all the cables required for your home studio for around £75. You probably won't need many stands. In fact, if you're a guitarist, the chances are you already have one. But one stand you will need is a microphone stand. Like anything else, there are poor quality ones that just won't last that long before they break, and there are high quality stands with a more solid construction that are designed to last. Some of the better mic stand companies out there are Beyerdynamic, who make the GST 400 boom mic stand, which sells for around £50. Then there's the Gator Frameworks GFW MIC 2100, which is a straight mic stand that sells for around £30. Or you could also look at models made by Quicklock and Hercules. I particularly like the Gator Frameworks 2100 Deluxe model because of its easy to use one-handed clutch mechanism. You'll probably find that a little later down the line you'll want to add other pieces of equipment too, like I have here. One such piece of kit that I've added to my studio is a portable vocal booth. This one's made by Editor's Keys and it's called the Vocal Booth Pro, and it cost around £150, and that price includes a really sturdy stand and the bracket to attach your microphone. If you treat your room with acoustic wedges like the ones I've used, then you could use a few extra wedges in one corner of your room and set your mic up there. However, if you don't have a free corner to do this, then you could buy a portable vocal booth like the Vocal Booth Pro and set your mic up in that instead, which essentially does the same kind of thing. The job of the portable vocal booth or extra sound wedges in the corner of your studio is to allow you to achieve a high quality sound from your microphone that is relatively dry and as perfect as it can be. The portable vocal booth will help you to get a good, clean and relatively dry vocal recording without any unwanted sound reflections or excess room reverb, which would otherwise hinder the recording. Having said that, most vocal booths won't totally eliminate unwanted room reverb, but if your room is bright and has a lot of sound reflections, a vocal booth will help greatly. Another piece of equipment that I've added is a product made by TC Helicon, and it's called the VoiceLive rack, which costs around £750. But if you're a vocalist, or if you intend to get vocalists into your studio to lay down tracks, then this is a piece of equipment you might definitely want to take a look at. Many people make the mistake of thinking that pieces of kit like this are more for live gigs than home recording. And although the TC VoiceLive is used by bands such as Depeche Mode, Mr. Big and many others in live situations, it's just as at home in the home recording studio environment. Now at this point you might be asking, why wouldn't you just use the plugins in your DAW? After all, Apple's Logic Pro 10 has some excellent reverb plugins, for example. But the fact is, if you buy a dedicated piece of outboard hardware like the VoiceLive rack, you're getting TC Helicon's superb processing with that amazing TC sound, which is clean and highly effective. Just ask anyone who's worked with professional outboard studio effects. Because they understand and know about studio quality effects processors, they'll tell you that in certain situations, if you want studio quality, then you'll have to buy hardware, not software. On top of that, the vocal sound engine, chips and processing inside the VoiceLive rack are going to be far better than any standalone plugin could offer, and it's also a tangible piece of outboard hardware, so you don't have to use the mouse quite so often. Also, many plugins aren't very inspiring, and the effects from a VoiceLive are all pure and of the highest sonic quality. The way the pitch correction, reverb and harmony work with the VoiceLive is simply stunning, and you can create your own custom presets in the unit too. The fact is, TC makes effects units, that's just what they do. And when you compare the results from a unit such as this to some of the plugin effects that come with your DAW, the quality difference is clear. This is because you're not taking the sound that's been digitized in your computer and pushing and pulling it into a different shape. And at the end of the day, there's only a certain amount of manipulation to any given sound before it starts to deteriorate in quality. The VoiceLive rack has hundreds of presets that you can choose from, as well as a brilliant reverb, delay, harmony, tuning, pitch and tone doubling, and rhythmic and transducer effects, not to mention a brilliant vocoder. And you can customize and create your own presets too. Also, if your singing ability isn't top notch, the VoiceLive rack can cover up a multitude of sins, from fixing your pitch to making sure that your tuning is spot on, or pitching your voice so it will sound higher or lower, so you can sing with a really low voice like Peter Steele of Type O Negative, or hit those high notes like Prince. But you can also change the characteristics and timbre of your voice to make it cleaner or more gravelly like Tom Waits, for example. Or you can even artificially exaggerate the auto-tune and pitch effect abruptly and produce what's become known as the Shure effect. Basically, the TC Helicon VoiceLive rack can offer you a lot more and will produce higher sonic results than the voice effects plugins. But you don't have to spend £750 on a VoiceLive rack because TC also make lower priced voice effects units too. You could take a look at their website, which is www.tc-helicon.com for more details. Finally, if you're new to the home recording scene, I'd recommend studying a few books. I'd certainly recommend a book or two on the DAW you decide to go with. For Logic Pro 10, I'd recommend the Apple Pro training series called Logic Pro 10 Professional Music Production, published by Peachbit Press. I'd also look at Recording Secrets and Mixing Secrets by Mike Senior. And if you intend recording your own vocals, but you're not that confident a singer, I'd also take a look at the book Singing for Dummies, published by John Wiley. If you study a few books like these, as well as the manuals that come with the equipment you'll buy, you'll educate yourself and you'll have that extra knowledge that will make you a better songwriter and music producer. Well, that brings me to the end of this video presentation. I hope you've enjoyed watching and hopefully you've picked up a few hints and tips along the way. All that remains now is for me to wish you the best of luck with your songwriting and music production and setting up your own home recording studio. Take care.